3 weeks. That's how long it had been since David actually spoke to another human being face to face. Sure, he'd been on video calls for work. He'd said thanks to the delivery guy who left groceries at his door. But an actual conversation, where someone looked him in the eyes and he looked back? Nothing. He didn't even realize it until Tuesday evening when his phone buzzed. His sister canceled their monthly dinner plans again. Sorry, something came up at work. Rain check? That made it 4 months in a row. He typed back no problem with a smiley face, but inside something cracked. David sat on his couch and looked around his apartment. Everything was within reach. His laptop, his phone, his tablet, his TV remote. He could order food with 3 taps. He could watch any movie ever made. He could talk to anyone in the world through a screen. But when was the last time he actually felt something real? His chest started feeling tight. His breathing got shallow. Was he having a heart attack? No, he'd Googled this before. Panic attack. He was having a panic attack because he couldn't remember the last time someone really saw him. Not his profile picture, not his video thumbnail in the corner of a Zoom call. Him. The actual person sitting here in sweatpants he'd worn for 3 days, with hair that hadn't been properly cut in months because even going to the barber felt like too much human contact. When did he become this person? He used to have friends. He used to go to parties. He used to enjoy being around people. But somewhere along the way, it became easier to stay home, easier to text than call, easier to order in than go out. And now he'd built a life that required almost zero human interaction. That night at 2 a.m, David forced himself to leave his apartment. He needed to go somewhere, anywhere where people existed in real life. He ended up at a 24-hour diner 3 blocks away. The kind of place with cracked vinyl seats and fluorescent lights that buzzed too loud. Walking through that door felt like stepping onto another planet. His hands were shaking. What would he even say? How do you order coffee? Do you wait to be seated? Did people still make small talk? His brain felt foggy, like he'd forgotten how to be a person in public. He slid into a booth and a waitress brought him a menu without really looking at him. Perfect. That's what he'd become. Someone people looked through instead of at. He ordered coffee and a sandwich he wouldn't eat, just to have a reason to sit there. The diner was full of other lonely people. A truck driver scrolling through his phone, a college student with headphones in, typing furiously on her laptop, an elderly man reading a newspaper, but even he had his phone face up on the table, checking it every few minutes. Everyone was alone together, all of them in the same room, but each locked in their own little digital bubble. David felt more alone sitting in that crowded diner than he did in his empty apartment. At least at home he could pretend he was choosing to be alone. Here he could see the truth. Everyone was lonely. Everyone was disconnected, and nobody seemed to notice or care. His sandwich arrived. The waitress set it down without a word and walked away. David stared at it. When did everything become so mechanical, so transactional? Even human interaction felt like a self-checkout line now. Quick, efficient, and completely devoid of actual connection. He tried to eat, but his throat felt tight. That pressure on his chest came back. What was he doing here? What was he trying to prove? That he could still function in society? That he was still capable of being around other humans? He couldn't even order a sandwich without feeling like he was failing some basic test of humanity. A couple walked in, both staring at their phones. They sat across from each other in a booth and continued staring at their phones. Not talking, not looking at each other, just sitting in the same physical space while being completely absent from each other's lives. David wondered if they even knew why they came here together. Habit, maybe, or fear of admitting they were just as alone as everyone else. The truck driver left. The college student packed up. New people came in. Same story. Phones, laptops, tablets. Everyone connected to everything except the person sitting 2 feet away. David finished his coffee. It was cold. He'd been sitting there for an hour, lost in his own head, and he hadn't even noticed. He paid his bill, left a big tip because he felt guilty for taking up space, and walked back into the night. The walk home felt longer than it was. Every step reminded him how much energy it took just to exist around other people now. How exhausting it was to be in public when you'd forgotten how to do it naturally. He'd turned into someone who needed to mentally prepare for the simplest interactions. Back in his apartment, he sat in the dark. The glow from the streetlights outside was the only illumination. He didn't turn on his computer, didn't check his phone, just sat there feeling the weight of his own isolation. Tomorrow he'd wake up and do it all again. Work from his desk. Eat meals alone. Watch TV alone. Go to sleep alone. Not physically alone because technically there were millions of people in this city, but actually alone in the way that really matters. His phone buzzed. A notification. Then another. His laptop pinged with an email. The world was trying to reach him through screens, through wires, through the digital void, but none of it felt real. None of it felt like it mattered. David closed his eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to be truly seen by another person, to have someone look at you with their full attention. No phone in their hand. No distraction in their eyes. Just pure, present, undivided focus. He couldn't remember. Somewhere in the last few years he'd lost that. Or maybe everyone had lost it together so gradually that nobody noticed until it was gone. He made a decision then. A small one, but it felt huge. He'd go back to that diner. Not tonight, but soon. He'd try again. Because the alternative, this half-life he was living, felt like slowly disappearing while still breathing. A week passed. David went back to the diner 4 times, always late at night when his apartment felt too small and his thoughts too loud. Each visit was the same. Order something. Sit alone. Watch other people sit alone. Leave feeling worse than when he arrived. But on Thursday night, something changed. It was raining hard. The kind of rain that hits the windows sideways and makes you grateful to be inside. David took his usual booth, ordered his usual coffee, and settled in for another hour of productive loneliness. That's when he noticed her. She was sitting in the corner booth, the one by the window. While everyone else hunched over their phones, she was writing in an old notebook. The kind with a worn leather cover and pages that looked like they'd been turned 1,000 times. No laptop, no tablet, no phone anywhere in sight. She'd pause, look up at the other people in the diner, and then write some more. Was she writing about them? Watching them the way he was watching them? The thought made him curious in a way he hadn't felt in months. She looked about his age, maybe a bit younger. Dark hair pulled back in a messy way that looked accidental but probably wasn't. She had this focused expression, like the rest of the world had faded away and only whatever she was writing mattered. David found himself staring. Not in a creepy way, he hoped. More like seeing another person actually existing in the present moment was so rare that it demanded attention. She was there, fully there, not half present while scrolling through someone else's life. Then the lights went out, complete darkness except for the occasional flash of lightning outside. The entire diner groaned in unison. David heard the immediate panic in people's voices. "My phone's dying. Do you have Wi-Fi?" I was in the middle of something. Everyone frantically checking their battery percentages, as if losing phone power during a blackout was the real emergency. David almost laughed at the absurdity of it. They were sitting in a dark diner during a storm, and everyone's biggest concern was staying connected to people who weren't even there. But in the corner booth, he saw a small light flicker. The woman had pulled out a candle. An actual candle. Who carries candles? She lit it with a match and set it on her table, then went right back to writing like nothing had happened. The glow from that single candle created a small circle of light in the darkness. David couldn't look away. While everyone else complained and panicked, she just existed, calm, present, unbothered by the chaos around her. Their eyes met across the dark diner. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, she looked directly at him, not past him, not through him, at him, and in that look was something he'd forgotten existed. Recognition. Like she saw an actual person sitting there, not just another shape in the room. Her expression wasn't judgmental or curious in a nosy way. It was more like she was acknowledging him as a fellow human being sharing this strange moment. Then she smiled. A real smile that reached her eyes. And she said something that would stick with him for a long time. "You look like someone who's forgotten what rain sounds like." David blinked. What kind of opening line was that? But the weird thing was, she was right. When was the last time he actually listened to rain? Really listened instead of just hearing it as background noise while he stared at a screen? "I guess I have," he said back, surprised by the sound of his own voice. "Come sit over here." She gestured to the seat across from her. "Unless you prefer drowning in your own thoughts over there." Something about the way she said it without any pressure or expectations made him actually do it. David picked up his coffee cup and crossed the dark diner, guided by her candlelight. "I'm David," he said, sliding into the booth. "Rebecca," she replied. Though my patients call me Becca, old habit. Patients. I'm a nurse. Psychiatric unit, mostly working with people who have dementia. The conversation started like that and didn't stop for 2 hours. While the power stayed out and the rain kept falling, they just talked. Really talked. Not the surface-level small talk that feels like filling silence. Deep, real conversation about actual things. Rebecca told him about her work, how she spent her days with people who were slowly losing their ability to recognize the world around them. How it taught her the value of being truly present with someone, because for her patients, the present moment was all they reliably had. They forget names, faces, entire lifetimes, she explained, the candlelight making her expression serious. But they remember feelings. They remember when someone really sees them. That stays somehow even when everything else fades. David found himself sharing things he hadn't told anyone in years. About his isolation. About feeling like he'd forgotten how to be around people. About that panic attack when he realized he'd gone weeks without a real conversation. You're not alone in that, Rebecca said softly. Half the people in this diner right now are having the same crisis. They just don't know it yet because they're too busy looking at screens to notice how lonely they feel. She told him about carrying the notebook everywhere, writing down moments that felt real. It's my way of staying present, she explained. If I'm paying attention enough to write about it, then I'm actually living it instead of just passing through. David asked why she didn't just use her phone like everyone else. Rebecca's expression shifted, became more guarded. I made a promise to myself. After something happened a few years ago, I decided I'd never let a screen come between me and the people I care about again. She didn't elaborate, and David didn't push. They talked about how strange modern life had become. How you could have 500 friends online and still feel completely alone. How you could be in a room full of people and feel invisible. How technology promised connection but somehow made everyone more isolated. It's like we're all living in parallel universes, David said, occupying the same physical space but existing in completely different realities. Exactly, Rebecca nodded. And the scariest part, most people don't even realize it's happening. They think this is normal now. They think feeling disconnected and lonely while being more connected than ever makes sense. The power suddenly came back on. The harsh fluorescent lights flickered to life. The Wi-Fi reconnected. Every phone in the diner immediately buzzed with notifications, and just like that, the spell broke. People went right back to their screens. The couple at the nearby booth stopped their actual conversation and returned to scrolling. The waitress turned the TV back on. Normal life resumed, if you could call it that. Rebecca blew out her candle. The moment had passed, but something had shifted. David felt it. That conversation, that connection, had reminded him of something important. This was possible. Real human interaction still existed. You just had to be brave enough to put down your phone and actually look at someone. Same time next week? Rebecca asked, standing up to leave. No phone to schedule it? David tried to joke. She smiled. If you're here, you're here. If not, maybe the next week. Or the one after. Real things don't need calendar invites. She wrote something on a napkin and slid it across the table. Her number, written in pen. The old-fashioned way, just in case, she said. Though honestly, sometimes it's better to just show up and see what happens. David watched her leave, walking out into the rain without running, like she wasn't afraid of getting wet. Like she was actually experiencing the weather instead of treating it as an obstacle between indoor spaces. He sat there for a while after she left, holding that napkin with her number on it. The diner was back to normal. Everyone isolated in their bubbles again, but something had changed for him. She'd looked at him like he was the only person in the room. Like he mattered, like he was actually there. And for the first time in months, he'd felt like he was actually somewhere instead of just existing in the background of his own life. David came back to the diner the next Thursday, and the Thursday after that. Rebecca was there each time like she'd promised. Well, not promised exactly, more like trusted that showing up was enough. They fell into a pattern. Late nights at the diner, long walks through the city, afternoons in parks where they'd sit and watch people passing by. Every time they met, Rebecca had one rule: no phones. Not for taking pictures, not for checking messages, not even for looking up some random fact they disagreed about. The not knowing is part of being present, she'd say. We don't need to Google every question the second it pops into our heads. At first, it drove David crazy. He'd reach for his phone out of habit and have to stop himself. But gradually something shifted. Without the constant option to escape into his screen, he had no choice but to actually be wherever he was. To actually notice things. Rebecca had this way of pointing out details he'd stopped seeing. The way afternoon light came through the trees at a specific angle. How the barista at their regular coffee shop hummed the same song every morning. The fact that the old man who fed pigeons in the park every day wore a different vintage watch each time. "How do you notice all this?" David asked one afternoon. "Practice," Rebecca said simply. "I spent years of my life half present, looking at my phone while people talked to me, taking pictures of moments instead of experiencing them. And then I lost someone because I wasn't paying attention. After that, I decided to actually live in my life instead of documenting it." She'd mentioned this before, that something had happened that changed her perspective. David wanted to know more, but he could tell it wasn't something she was ready to share yet. So he didn't push. Instead, he just listened when she was ready to talk and stayed quiet when she wasn't. Through Rebecca's eyes, David started seeing his own life differently. She'd ask him questions that made him think. Real questions, not just conversation fillers. When was the last time you did something that scared you? If you could only keep 3 objects in your entire apartment, what would they be? What's something you believed at 20 that you laugh about now? These conversations weren't like the surface-level small talk he was used to. They dug deeper. They required him to actually think about his answers, to be honest, to be vulnerable. David learned that Rebecca worked with dementia patients because her grandmother had Alzheimer's. She'd spent years watching this brilliant, vibrant woman slowly forget everything. But even at the end, her grandmother would light up when someone truly paid attention to her. "That's when I realized," Rebecca explained, "presence is the greatest gift you can give someone. Not your partial attention while you scroll through your phone. Your full, complete, undivided focus. For people losing their memories, sometimes that's all they have left." She told him about her patients. About Mr. Chen, who couldn't remember his own name anymore, but would smile every time someone held his hand. About Mrs. Rodriguez, who forgot she had children, but remembered the feeling of being loved. About how her job had taught her that connection wasn't about remembering facts or details. It was about showing up fully in each moment. David started sharing more too. He told her about his work, how he'd built this entire career around avoiding people, how somewhere along the way, efficiency and convenience became more important than connection. How he'd convinced himself that he preferred being alone when really he'd just forgotten how to be around others. "You didn't forget," Rebecca said gently. "You're just out of practice, like a muscle you haven't used in a while." She was right. The more time he spent actually present with her, the easier it became. His social anxiety started fading. Conversations with strangers stopped feeling impossible. He even called his sister instead of texting her, and they talked for an hour about real things instead of just exchanging emoji reactions. But it wasn't all easy. There were moments when David felt himself pulling back, getting scared of how much this friendship was starting to matter. One afternoon, Rebecca asked him about his longest relationship. 2 years, he admitted. "Ended about 3 years ago. She said I was emotionally unavailable, that I was more interested in my phone than in her. Was she right?" David thought about it. Really thought about it instead of giving some defensive answer. Yeah, she was right. I'd be sitting next to her on the couch and we'd both be on our phones. We'd go to dinner and scroll while waiting for food. We took a vacation once and I spent half of it answering work emails. I thought I was being productive, but really I was just avoiding actually being with her. And after she left, I told myself I was better off alone. That relationships were distracting. That I was more focused without one. But honestly, I think I was just relieved I didn't have to try anymore. Being alone was easier. Rebecca nodded, understanding without judgment. "It is easier," she agreed. "Being alone means never risking rejection, never being vulnerable, never having to show someone the parts of yourself you're not proud of. But easier doesn't mean better." She told him then about her younger brother, about how he'd died 3 years ago in a car accident, about how the last time she saw him, he'd tried to talk to her about something important and she'd been on her phone, barely listening. About how she'd never forgiven herself for not being present in those final moments they had together. "I can't get that time back," she said, her voice quiet. "I can't undo being distracted when he needed me there. So now I make sure I'm actually here for the people in my life, because you never know which moment might be the last one." David didn't know what to say to that. The weight of her loss, the guilt she carried, it felt too big for words. So he just sat with her in that moment, fully present, letting the silence be okay. They sat on a park bench for a long time, watching the sun set, not talking, not needing to fill the space with noise, just existing together, two people who'd learned how rare and valuable real connection actually was. Then David's phone rang. Actually rang, not just buzzed, his boss. He ignored it. "You can answer that," Rebecca said. "No," David replied. "I'm here right now." "He can wait," Rebecca smiled. A real full smile that told him she understood what that choice meant. How much easier it would be to answer, to escape into work, to avoid the discomfort of just sitting with your own thoughts and feelings. But he was learning. Slowly he was learning. His phone rang again. Then a text. Then an email notification. The digital world pulling at him, demanding his attention, insisting that whatever was happening on the screen was more important than the actual human sitting next to him. He turned his phone off. Completely off. Not just silent, but powered down. "They offered me a promotion," David said suddenly. "More money, more responsibility, but also more isolation, more screen time. Probably means relocating to another city." "When did they offer this?" 2 weeks ago. "I've been avoiding making a decision." Rebecca didn't say anything. She just waited, letting him work through his thoughts out loud. "I should take it, right? It's the smart career move. More money, better title. That's what you're supposed to want. Is it what you want?" David didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe he did, but he wasn't ready to admit it yet. They left the park as the streetlights came on. David walked Rebecca to her apartment building, a habit they'd fallen into. At her door, she turned to him. "You know what the hardest part of my job is?" she asked. "Watching people forget?" "No. It's watching their families stop visiting because it's too hard. Because their loved one doesn't recognize them anymore, so what's the point? They forget that even when the memory is gone, the person is still there, still deserving of presence and attention and love." She paused, looking at him directly. "I have this patient, Mrs. Rodriguez. I've been taking care of her for 3 years. She used to tell me stories about her life, about her husband who died young, about her kids who are too busy to visit, about the garden she kept in her backyard. Now she doesn't remember any of that. Doesn't remember me most days, but I still show up. I still talk to her. I still hold her hand. Because being there matters even when it feels like it doesn't." David understood what she wasn't saying, that she was afraid. That getting close to people meant the risk of losing them. That she'd built her whole life around being present for others while keeping herself at a safe distance. "Rebecca," he started to say, but she shook her head. "I'll see you next Thursday," she said, and went inside. David stood there for a while looking up at her building. Somewhere in the last few weeks, this had become more than just two lonely people keeping each other company. It had become something real, something that mattered, and that was terrifying for both of them. He walked home slowly, thinking about the promotion, about what his life would look like if he took it. More money in his bank account, better title on his business cards, same isolation, just in a different city. Or he could choose something else. Something messier and scarier and uncertain. He could choose to stay, to keep showing up, to keep learning how to be present, to see where this thing with Rebecca might go if he was brave enough to let it. The smart choice was obvious. The safe choice was clear. But for the first time in years, David was starting to understand that safe and smart weren't the same as alive. David took the promotion. He told himself he was being practical, making the responsible decision. He had 2 months before the move to Seattle. Plenty of time to figure things out, plenty of time to tell Rebecca, except he didn't tell her. He couldn't find the right moment. Or maybe he was just avoiding it, because he knew what it would mean. So he kept showing up on Thursdays like nothing had changed, even though everything had changed. Rebecca could tell something was off. She'd ask if he was okay and he'd say he was just tired. Work stress, normal stuff. The lies tasted bitter, but he kept telling them anyway. Then Mrs. Rodriguez stopped recognizing Rebecca. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Rebecca came into work like always, went to check on her favorite patient like always. But when she said good morning, Mrs. Rodriguez looked at her like she was a stranger. No spark of recognition, no smile. Just blank confusion. "Who are you?" the old woman asked. 3 years of daily conversations. 3 years of holding hands and sharing stories. 3 years of connection, gone in an instant. Rebecca kept her professional smile in place, explained she was her nurse, helped Mrs. Rodriguez with breakfast. But inside, something broke. She called David that night crying. Actually crying, which he'd never heard before. "I know it's part of the job," she said through tears. "I knew this would happen eventually. But I thought maybe I'd be different. Maybe she'd remember me because I was always so present, so focused. How stupid is that?" "It's not stupid," David said, wanting to comfort her but not knowing how. "It is, though. All that time, all that effort to be fully present with her, and now it's like I never existed. Like none of it mattered." David wanted to tell her about the promotion then. Wanted to confess that he was leaving. But she was already hurting and he couldn't add to it. So he kept quiet and just listened while she cried. After that night, Rebecca started pulling away. She canceled their Thursday meetup. Then the next one. She threw herself into work, taking extra shifts, staying late. When David texted asking if she was okay, she'd send back short responses. "Fine, just busy." David knew what she was doing because he'd done it himself for years. Building walls. Protecting herself from more pain by pushing people away before they could leave first. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was planning to leave her without saying anything, and she was shutting him out before he could do exactly that. He spent his days packing boxes and pretending this was what he wanted. His company was thrilled with his decision. His family said they were proud. Everyone congratulated him on the promotion, and he felt emptier with each passing day. 2 weeks before his move, David's sister called. Actually called, not texted. They'd been talking more since he started spending time with Rebecca. Actual phone conversations that lasted longer than 5 minutes. "Are you really doing this?" she asked. "Doing what?" "Running away, again, like you always do when things start to matter." "I'm not running away. I got a promotion. David, I'm your sister. I know you. You meet someone who actually sees you for the first time in years. And suddenly you're moving across the country? That's not a coincidence." He wanted to argue, but she was right. "Of course she was right, she's pulling away anyway," he said. "One of her patients stopped recognizing her and now she won't return my calls. So what does it matter if I leave or stay? It matters because you care about her, and she cares about you, and you're both so scared of getting hurt that you're willing to throw away something real." After they hung up, David sat in his half-packed apartment and realized his sister was right. He was running. He'd been running his whole adult life. From relationships, from connection, from anything that required him to be vulnerable, and now he was about to run again. And this time he might lose the one person who'd made him feel like he was actually living, instead of just existing. Meanwhile, Rebecca was having her own crisis. Mrs. Rodriguez's condition got worse. She stopped eating, stopped responding to anyone. The doctor said it was just a matter of time now. Rebecca sat with her during her lunch breaks, holding the old woman's hand even though Mrs. Rodriguez had no idea who she was. Other nurses asked why she bothered. The patient didn't know her, wouldn't remember her. What was the point? But Rebecca kept showing up, because somewhere in her mind she'd connected Mrs. Rodriguez to her brother. Both people she'd loved. Both people who would forget or leave. Both people who made her question whether being present even mattered when loss was inevitable. On a Friday afternoon, Mrs. Rodriguez had a moment of clarity. Just a brief window where the fog lifted and she was herself again. She looked at Rebecca and smiled. "You're the girl who stays," Mrs. Rodriguez said softly. "Yes," Rebecca whispered. "I'm the girl who stays." "Good, don't stop. Don't stop staying even when it hurts. That's what love is. Showing up even when it would be easier to leave." Those were her last coherent words. Mrs. Rodriguez passed away that night, quietly with Rebecca holding her hand. At the funeral, Rebecca met Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter, a woman in her 50s who looked exhausted and guilty. "I should have visited more," the daughter said. "I kept meaning to, but it was so hard seeing her not recognize me. It felt pointless." "It wasn't pointless," Rebecca said. "Even when she couldn't remember, being there mattered." She felt it. The love, the presence, that stayed with her. The daughter cried, and Rebecca held her, and something shifted inside Rebecca's chest. The wall she'd been building started to crack. That night, David went to the airport. His flight wasn't until the next week, but he'd gone to the gate anyway, telling himself he needed to check the layout, needed to be prepared. Really, he was trying to convince himself this was what he wanted. He sat at the gate and watched families saying goodbye. Watched business people on their phones already checked out from wherever they were. Watched everyone living these half-present lives, physically in one place while mentally somewhere else entirely. Then he saw a father and daughter. The little girl, maybe 5 years old, was trying to show her dad something she'd drawn. But he was on his phone, scrolling, barely acknowledging her. "Daddy, look at me," she said. That's nice, sweetie." "Daddy, you're not looking." "Look at me." "I am looking." "No, you're not. You're looking at your phone." "I want you to look at me." The father sighed, annoyed, and kept scrolling. David watched this little girl's face fall. Watched her give up trying to get her father's attention. Watched her go quiet and withdrawn. And he saw himself. Saw every relationship he'd ruined by being physically present but emotionally absent. Saw Rebecca desperately trying to get people to actually see her, actually be with her. Saw his sister, his ex-girlfriend, every person he'd ever made feel invisible while pretending to pay attention. He stood up abruptly. His heart was pounding. What was he doing here? What was he running toward? A better job title? More money in a bank account? The same isolation he'd always had, just in a different city with better weather? Rebecca was right. Mrs. Rodriguez was right. Being present, really being there for people, that's what mattered. Not success. Not career advancement. Not efficiency and productivity and all the things he'd convinced himself were important. He practically ran out of the airport. Caught a taxi back to the city. Showed up at the hospital where Rebecca worked. But she wasn't there. Asked a nurse where he could find her and was told she'd taken a leave of absence after her patient died. He tried her apartment. No answer. Tried calling. Voicemail. For 3 days, David searched for her. Called everyone who might know where she was. Finally, one of her co-workers mentioned that Mrs. Rodriguez used to talk about a community garden on the east side, about how she planned to visit it someday but never did. David found the garden just before sunset, and there was Rebecca, sitting on a bench surrounded by tomato plants and sunflowers, writing in her notebook. She looked up when she heard him approaching. Her eyes were red from crying, but she wasn't surprised to see him. "You're supposed to be packing," she said. "I was. I am. I don't know." David sat down next to her, not too close. "I heard about Mrs. Rodriguez. I'm sorry." She remembered me at the end. For just a minute she knew who I was. "That's good, is it? What's the point of being remembered for 1 minute before you die? What's the point of any of it?" David didn't have an answer. So they sat in silence, watching the sun set over the garden. Finally, Rebecca spoke again. "I'm tired, David. I'm tired of caring about people and losing them. My brother, my patients, and now..." She trailed off. "Now what? You're leaving. I know you're leaving. You got a promotion and you're moving, and you didn't tell me because you didn't want to deal with this conversation." David flinched. "She was right. How long have you known?" he asked. "Since the day you found out? I could see it in your face. The way you pulled back. The way you started disappearing even when you were sitting right next to me." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just be honest. You're doing the same thing I am. Protecting yourself. Building walls. It's easier to leave than to stay and risk actually feeling something." They sat there as the light faded. Two people who'd found something real and were both too scared to hold on to it. The garden grew quiet except for the sound of wind in the leaves and distant traffic. "Mrs. Rodriguez told me something before she died," Rebecca said finally. "She said love is showing up even when it would be easier to